Thank you and good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining. The title of this brief presentation is What does it take to develop an agricultural NAMA? And the contents of this presentation are organized around three main topics. A general introduction to mitigation actions in agriculture. Secondly, we're going to speak about nationally appropriate mitigation actions, the so-called NAMAs in agriculture. And finally, we're going to speak a little bit about what does it take to develop a NAMA. So, as you know, agriculture is a key economic sector, especially in developing countries. It is a key food and material provider at the global level. It is an important source of employment, income, and driver of economic growth. It is key for low-income rural populations' livelihoods. It is a highly vulnerable sector to climate impacts, and it is an important emission source. AFOLU, this means agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, explains 23% of global emissions, according to the 5th assessment report of the IPCC. This is the Intergovernmental Panel of Experts on Climate Change. It is expected that climate change will have further adverse effects on agricultural production and income levels, and also aggravate food insecurity and malnutrition. So, when we think of mitigation in agriculture, there are mainly two main mechanisms within a large set of options. These are mainly related to two things. First of all, removing emissions from the atmosphere to soils and plants. This can be mainly done through an improvement in nutrient and waste management practices, pasture management and crop rotation, and also the second mechanism through which we can reduce emissions in the agriculture sector is to reduce direct emissions of methane, oxide, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide through more efficient use of nitrogen fertilizers, improved livestock management, and avoided emissions through avoided deforestation and forest degradation caused by agriculture. All these measures that are supposed to be applied at the field level should also be supported by institutional measures, research and development, education, and legislation frameworks. So, what are the NAMAs? NAMA is a tool that has been developed within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC International Climate Negotiations. The concept was first introduced in the Bali Action Plan agreed in COP13 in 2007. NAMAs are still an evolving concept. They are basically voluntary actions undertaken by developing countries to achieve greenhouse gas emissions, GHG emissions reductions, and they are supposed to be undertaken in the context of sustainable development and in a measurable, reportable, and verifiable manner. This is known as MRV. More details about MRV for agricultural NAMAs are going to be presented later by another team member. This means that NAMAs are conceived with mitigation as a development issue. NAMAs may be supported and enabled by financing, technology, and capacity building provided by developed countries. At the beginning, there was agreement that NAMAs can include emission reductions compared to a baseline, improvements in natural sinks, for example, forests, technology development and diffusion, development of policy regulations or institutional frameworks aimed at fostering mitigation and creating an enabling environment for those actions, and also the creation of methodologies for information gathering in MRV system. However, NAMAs being elaborated and submitted seem to favor the achievement of direct emission reductions. The type of NAMAs that are being registered in the UNFCCC International NAMA Registry are mainly of two types. On the one side, NAMAs seeking support for preparation and implementation. These are actions that require support from the international community regarding technology transfer, capacity building, and/or financing. On the other side, there are NAMAs seeking for recognition. These are actions that developing countries usually undertake without the support of developed countries, but that are communicated in order to show a commitment with cooperative action at the global scale. For the time being, there are 54 registered NAMAs in the UNFCCC NAMA registry. Only 2 of them are agricultural NAMAs, both of them developed in Latin America, one in Uruguay and the other one in Chile. The NAMA in Uruguay is called Sustainable Production with Low Emission Technologies in Agriculture and Agro-Industry Production Chains, and it aims at reducing emissions from waste from the agricultural sector and agro-industries and replace conventional fuels with bioenergy. With regards to the Chilean NAMA, it is called National Program for Catalyzing Industrial and Commercial Organic Waste Management in Chile, and the objective is to foster the installation of the first facilities for industrial and commercial organic waste management. So what does it take to develop a NAMA in the agriculture sector? We can think of 7 main steps. First of all, a general description of the NAMA. Secondly, a description of the context and the sector. Then an estimation of the mitigation potential, an estimation of the costs of the NAMA, an analysis of the development co-benefits the NAMA could generate, a barrier analysis, and finally an MRV analysis. So, step 1. Well, we have to describe the NAMA. This means specifying the title, the objective, the scope, whether it is nationally or subnationally or regional, an initiative, the thematic focus, the activities the NAMA is going to include, and the start and termination date. Secondly, we have to describe the context and sector, what means describing the national and sectorial framework in terms of national policies and sectorial policies that may have impact on the agriculture sector and the NAMA itself. Thirdly, we have to estimate the mitigation potential. This means, first of all, defining a baseline. This is a dynamic projection of business as usual activities, policies, and technologies. This is a projection of the usual practices without considering the activities in the NAMA. And secondly, we have to estimate the emissions associated both to the baseline. This can be done by using the 2006 IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories, for example, and also the emissions associated to the mitigation options considered in the NAMA. The truth is that there are no standardized models for developing baselines and estimating emissions associated to different agricultural practices, mainly due to the fact that mitigation options in agriculture tend to be site-specific. However, there are some tools that can be useful to quantify emissions in the agriculture sector. For example, the EXACT tool developed by FAO, the multi-criteria analysis tool MCA4 Climate developed by UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, the livestock analysis model developed by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, and the GIG Protocol Agricultural Guidance developed recently by the World Resources Institute. At the end of the presentation, I will give you some links where you can access directly to all these tools. Step 4, we have to estimate the costs of the NAMA. This means, on the one side, estimating the total cost means direct and indirect cost of implementing the options considered in the NAMA. These are costs that are going to be afforded by the private sector, and also the administrative costs of the NAMA that are going to be afforded mainly by the public sector, and also how much it's going to cost to develop the MRV system. Secondly, we have to estimate the incremental cost. This is the difference between the total cost of the NAMA and the baseline cost. This means the cost of continuing with current practices. Then, an analysis of the needed supported is required to be done. This means analyzing the financial, technical, and capacity building requirements of the NAMA, and also the disbursement profile the NAMA needs with regards to funding. And finally, we have to identify financial resources. This means analyzing domestic budgets that could be applied to the NAMA and international donors that can help implementing the actions being considered. Step 5, The development co-benefits should be analyzed. This means analyzing the social, economic, and environmental impacts that the NAMA can have in terms of employment generation, rural income, capacity building, higher productivity, productive risk diversification, balance of payments, soil conservation, water conservation, pollution reduction, higher efficiency, natural resource use, diminished requirements of land, and biodiversity protection. Step 5, a barrier analysis is needed. This means, first of all, analyzing the legal and institutional framework, the actors involved, and implementation arrangements that are needed. And secondly, identifying different types of barriers: institutional barriers, economic, financial, and market barriers, technical and knowledge barriers, social, cultural, and behavioral barriers. And finally, the MRV development is needed, and as I told you before, this is going to be presented later in more detail. So, to sum up, NAMAs are voluntary actions undertaken by developing countries that consider mitigation as a development issue. Therefore, agricultural NAMAs shall be considered as an opportunity to move to more productive and resilient systems with more efficient use of natural resources. In this context, why should developing countries undertake agricultural NAMAs? Mainly to exploit synergies between agricultural mitigation and development objectives, increase food security, enhance adaptation, promotion of rural energy access, reduce water pollution, restoration of degraded lands, increasing efficiency in resource uses, but also to improve competitiveness levels, to anticipate potential barriers in international trade based on exports' carbon content, to decouple emissions from GDP, and to address one of the main drivers of deforestation through increased productivity. To achieve more resource-efficient and climate-resilient productive systems, agricultural NAMAs shall consider management changes in soils, water use, nutrients, and seeds, but also changes in national and regional policies, governance systems, and financial mechanisms. Thank you very much. Here is my email in case you want to ask me any further questions. And I leave you here some references regarding FAO documents, the fifth assessment report of the IPCC, and also the links to the tools that can be useful to estimate and quantify emissions reduction in the agriculture sector. Thank you.